And this quite understandably outraged the people. So they stopped this contractor working, they fired them, and just said, you know what, we're going to start over, we're just going to make this a park. So there are several thousand sets of human remains underneath what's now the Denver Botanic Gardens and its neighboring park, Cheeseman Park, to this day. And when I had a chance to visit the gardens and talk to the staff and management team there, they regularly have strange occurrences, unsurprisingly, going on. Their car park, for example, the parking lot just across the street, was buried on the old Catholic part of the cemetery. And when they broke ground on that, they would regularly have to call law enforcement because they kept finding skulls and various other pieces of human remains. So staff at the Botanic Gardens have heard disembodied voices, seen strange things, felt strange things. Telephones, the old style bell telephones inside the house, which are no longer connected and haven't been for many years, have been heard ringing inside that building by managers and people that, generally don't believe in this kind of stuff. So they were kind enough to give me access along with my team of investigators. And so we were locked in there for several nights. And that is the crux of the book you're talking about, The Dead Below, because truly that's what's below the Botanic Gardens, the dead.
So did you get any good evidence?
We did, or it would have been a really thin book, wouldn't it? Which happens from time to time. There are a number of books I haven't written because I've been to places that seem like they would be terrific fodder for a story, and there just was no evidence. There was nothing to write about. So we got several things. I mean, primarily we got EVPs that were genuinely creepy. One was that we were in the basement, and once you're in the basement of the Botanic Gardens, you are actually below the ground, obviously. So if you think about that for a minute, once you get beyond the walls of the building, there are coffins in the ground, kind of all around you.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my colleagues had asked the question, where are we right now? And had gotten a voice back that said, in a mass grave.
Really?
Wow. Which genuinely sent my hackles up. That was really quite chilling,
Yeah.
But we recorded EVPs of a woman speaking upstairs in the Waring house. Probably my favorite moment, because you can't write comedy like this, was that I want to say it was our fourth or fifth night, and we were meeting the security guards, and one of the security guards in the past had quit, like very abruptly in the middle of the night, and I was never able to figure out why. Had some strange experience, but this young lady was fairly new to the job, and she said, "Oh, you're the ghost people, huh?" She said, "I would love to have a paranormal experience." And I said, "Well, you're in the right place. You keep working here. There's a chance you will." And she said, "I would just love that." And as she's speaking to us, we're carrying our equipment cases through the gardens to the main manor house, the Waring house, where we were spending the night. And she said, I everything is locked up. I'm going to let you in. I closed down earlier on tonight when the last people left. I switched off the lights. And just as she said that, we turned around a corner, and there was the house, and half the lights in the house were on. And she went, no. You know what? I'll unlock the door. You guys call the police if you need any help, okay? And so I've never seen somebody do such a quick 180 in my life. She went from, oh, this whole ghost thing is cool, I've seen it on TV, to, oh, this is where I work. And now she knew that she had locked up. She knew that she had switched out the lights. This is a competent young lady, and she ran into that moment that you sometimes get with people in this field where maybe they're kind of skeptical, maybe they're open to the possibility, but they haven't had that one experience where when it happens to you personally as an individual, it changes your whole worldview. You know what I mean?
It's like that uh-oh moment.
Yeah, if you're a religious person, if you're a Christian, you might say it's a road to Damascus moment, right? But you watch somebody, finally it sinks in that this stuff happens and it's real and it's interested in you. And I've never seen a security person depart so quickly in my life. So bless her. We never saw her again for the rest of the night, and the day shift came and unlocked us the following morning.
Well, now, what has been, I would say, you probably don't get scared easy, but what is the most scariest place that you've actually been in?
Well, I mean, it really depends. I mean, on the one hand, I would say that fear is not entirely. I've been afraid. I'll give you a good example of that room in Asylum 49. That was pretty scary to me, even though nothing concrete was happening. So a lot of the time, it's psychological.
Right.
It's your own fears, I think, that are preying on you. But I've also been to a few scary places. I mean, the Villisca Axe Murder House, which I'm also working on a book about. Just knowing what happened in that house, the fact that an entire family was murdered by a man with an axe, their own axe, as it happened, and the killer was never caught. I mean, that is kind of an awful and very creepy place to spend the night, just knowing what happened there. Fox Hollow Farm, knowing that so many young men were murdered in the basement, and then their remains were burned and mulched in the woods directly behind the house. That's the same deal. You could just go to some of the most awful places sometimes, and it definitely brings a degree of fear with it. But mostly fear is connected with the unknown. Fear lessens when you understand certain things. So I think the more you educate yourself on the tools, techniques, and craft of paranormal research, I think that the more it diminishes fear.
Well, I mean, a lot of us have had that moment or just grew up thinking that, oh, yeah, of course spirits are around us all the time. When was that moment for you when you realized that, oh, yeah, this stuff is real?
Well, I think that I grew up fascinated with this. I grew up in a house my grandparents owned that they told me stories about that was supposedly haunted, which I never had any evidence of that other than the testimony of my aunts, my uncles, and my grandparents. So, it sent me on this road to the library, first of all, where I was really wanting to check out every single book I could on ghosts and hauntings. I just became fascinated with it, with the paranormal. And growing up in the 70s as a kid, I also remember Halloween was not a big thing in England. I mean, it is now, but it was seen as a very almost exclusively American holiday back then. It wasn't something that was, widely celebrated, I don't think, or at least not where I lived. But I just found that the ghost stories that I could read about kept me enthralled and kept me wanting these answers. And it was only when I became a grown adult, went to college, and then started doing some research with a local group that I began to have testable, objective experiences for myself. And the one that really, really swung me, I think, from, yeah, I pretty much believe this to this absolutely happens. We were investigating a private residence, and it was a poltergeist case, a single mom and her children. And I remember that her brother had been staying with them for a while, and she had found some occult symbols that he'd been writing in his room, and he'd been reading a lot of material like the Satanic Bible and things of that nature. And that's when the disturbances had begun. And so we worked on this case, and we didn't get much in the way of evidence, but throughout the night, we would be in the living room of this very small, easily controllable house. We'd locked all the doors, we'd sealed all the windows. There was no way somebody could have gotten in past us. And the living room was next to the kitchen. And about every 45 minutes to an hour, because we're British, we would send someone in to go make the tea to keep us awake, And this would be about 1995, 1996. And one of my colleagues, 2 o'clock in the morning, went through to go put on the teapot and just kind of exclaimed, whoa. And we all went in, and the cutlery drawer had been pulled out, and the knives, forks, spoons had been taken out of the cutlery drawer, and they'd been kind of laid out on the side on one of the countertops. And there was, no matter how I twisted my brain, there was no way I could explain it rationally, The seals on the door which led out of the kitchen to the backyard were still intact from the inside. I know nobody had gotten past us because we were sitting in front of the only other door that led into the kitchen. And the other thing that struck me was it had been done completely silently. We hadn't heard any jingling or clinking of silverware. So how do you do that? How do you get access to a locked room where one of the doors is being watched. Oh, and also there was a security light outside that was motion triggered. So if you approach the back door from outside, security light would go on. And how do you do that? How do you remove all of these knives, forks, and spoons in complete silence without leaving a physical trace of your entry and then get out again? There comes a point where the rational explanation is more unbelievable than the paranormal one, if that makes sense. You have to jump through more hoops for a quote unquote, sensible explanation than to say this is paranormal in nature. And that was my big defining moment.
And where was this place at?
It was just an ordinary residence. It's in my hometown. Well, actually near my hometown, a place called Loughborough. Again, never did explain it away. Never did explain it. So it was just my first exposure to something that I could not account for.
Would it have an entrance into the kitchen, like from a hidden door or something?
This is a very small house, and British houses of this type are all laid out the same way. After the Second World War, there was, thanks to some redesign that the German Air Force had done on a national level.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
To put it politely, the British government had to build a million houses or something of that nature, and they called them prefab houses, prefabricated, in the same way that every McDonald's is prefabricated today, right? These buildings come in a big kit, and they just throw them up wherever they're at. Well, in the same way, that's how these houses were. So they were all laid out with a pretty much identical floor plan. And so, there was no way in or out of that room. You would have either had to go past us or come in through the back door, triggering a security light, unlock the back door silently, open it silently, and then be able to get out after replacing the seals we put on the doors. It was physically impossible.
Wow. There's stuff like that, I would just be flabbergasted. I wouldn't be scared, but I'd be just like you, trying to figure out how could something like that happen. There's got to be something to this spirit-wise. So that's kind of things that I get interested in.
What were the other types of manifestations this poltergeist was causing? Do you remember?
Well, perhaps most disturbingly, whenever the mom would take a shower and then would come try to leave the bathroom, the door would be pulled from the other side, pulled closed. And this would happen even when her children weren't in the house, when the house was empty, almost as if something did not want to let her out. So that was a little disturbing, and that's why she'd finally reached out. And this was a few years before the big media explosion of ghost hunting shows. So Most Haunted hadn't aired in the UK, Ghost Hunters hadn't aired in the States. So really there were very few paranormal teams nationally that you could call in the UK, You could try calling the police, and they would generally refer you to someone like us. And it was that piece of phenomena, the door being held closed, which finally made her reach out for help, which made her afraid in her own home. The rest of it was the fairly typical objects being moved, unexplained pools of water turning up throughout the house when there was no pet. Pet urine is one of the first things I think about, but there was no pet to account for it. And you also have this pressure cooker situation you often see in poltergeist cases of a family that's breaking up and undergoing a great deal of emotional stress, plus children who are growing, and at least one is heading towards puberty. That's the classic perfect storm, isn't it, for a poltergeist outbreak?
Sure.
And that's before we add in the brother that decides he's going to experiment with the occult.